Today I'm going to clean and break down my pool pump filter, and I want to show you a couple of the tools that we use to do that with. I gotta use this 7/8 socket, a big screwdriver, pair of channel locks. Don't necessarily need a big hammer, but sometimes it helps. Definitely helps putting it back together. And a water hose. So what we're going to do first is remove this carriage bolt, and down here there is a drain that needs to come out. So what typically happens is this normally runs at a 20-pound pressure, and when it gets up to 30, that means my filter is clogged up. So I'm at 30 today. I tried doing everything else and nothing dropped it down. So I'm going to pull it, see what happens. So here we are back at the filter again. This is a big one. Let's see if there's any pressure in it. Turn that to release the pressure. So we're good there. The other thing to make sure is that your system's off, obviously. I've already turned it off. It's in an off state, so it can't automatically turn back on. There's no timers in play. Start to reduce the pressure here. This is a really long thread. Remember the direction it goes on. We got a washer here, a spring, and another washer. And I can hear the pressure relief above me. What I usually do is I just kind of keep it all together. Set it over here out of the way with my tools. This is where the screwdriver come in a little bit handy once you knock it around. Now this thing's full of water, so get ready for the flood. Not sure how to place the camera, so we'll leave it here and see if I can get it. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. Am I going the right way? It's always confusing since it's upside down. Yeah. See, the water's trying to come out already. Once you get a little ways, it really wants to run. Wait for it. Here it comes. Here's the first one. Grab up here. Oh, that's like a there. Let it drain a little bit so the pressure builds out. Starting to slow down now. Break the band off and remove the lid. Place the lid out of the way over someplace, but here we go. All four of these have to come off. These aren't in really bad shape, actually. Looks like we got a lot of worms. We've been having rain like crazy, so the pump's been picking up everything. including tons and tons of worm bits. And those things will clog a filter like crazy. Nasty. So we gotta pull all these off. Stick a screwdriver in, just kind of gently do each section a little at a time so you don't bend the filters up. Okay. Well, that's the problem with doing it with one hand and holding a phone. Typically you don't throw things like that. So there's a screen that's in the top of this manifold holder. A screen and a spring that flew off. There it is. So the spring's real important. You got to remember to keep that because that will hold the tension. And you can just pull these up, and that's how they remove from inside. And then I recommend having a solid surface if possible to then put these filters on. And get your trusty hose with some kind of a sprayer that's somewhat strong. And what we're going to do is spray this down. The easiest way to do this is standing them up. If I'm holding a phone, I'm a little handicapped at doing that. But I'll give you an idea what it should look like. They're cleaned up. No easy way to do this with the phone. I need a partner. So I'm going to go ahead and clean these up, spray them down, and then I'll kick the video back up. Real quick, one of the ways you can tell that these are really dirty, I mean, here's after they've been cleaned and you can see through the holes on the back side. But the biggest thing is my pool sits under an oak tree. It's got a lot of pollen. So we're picking up just tons of debris and leaf crap that's coming down. Comes off real easy, but you know, when you start getting clumps like that, there's no way that the water can get through those clumps, and so that's why you really gotta, on top of the worm guts and all the crap that gets in. So those are the things that you have to deal with when cleaning these out. I'm going to work on some more. Here's a tip when cleaning these. Use some kind of a riser so your back isn't bent so much from having it on the ground. And I like to start from the bottom and then work a couple lines up. So that way if you start from up here and you're trying to push down into the mud, it doesn't work real well. So we'll clean off these bottom sections first. Kind of tilt it so it doesn't spray back at you. And then you can come up and push this stuff down and it comes through a lot easier. And it doesn't have to be perfect on your first clean through, because you'll flip it over and do the other side and then flip it over and make sure you get both sides of that screen filter as you're working your way through all the muck. You can see how much stuff is usually the bottom and the tops are usually the worst. And come back through here and pull all of that down. So that's the easiest way to work through cleaning these filters. There's all four cleaned up. I had to move the bands, so that's why that one's a little crooked there, but you can move these bands up and down so you can get some of the stuff that gets stuck in between them, and you can also separate you know, if you get stuff in between these lines, you can separate them and move them around so you can get them as clean as possible. They don't have to be perfect, but they do have to be at least that clean. This is the manifold that they came off of. So the next step, you'll find dirt and debris that gets inside. So you still got the drain plug off. With that drain plug off, you can kind of rinse around, get the rim, because there'll be stuff that gets into this rubber seal here. If that seal comes off, it's no big deal. You can place it back on. Sometimes I get lucky and it stays there and I don't mess with it, but it's often a good idea to pull it off, check it for any rips or tears. Some people will put like a sealant lubricant on it to keep it soft. I don't, but totally can. Once you get all this debris kind of wiped down, I go the next step and I remove this completely. Pull this out and take a look inside. Make sure that I got all the debris out of the base. That intake right there goes over to my heater, so you got to be careful with debris getting down into there because it is going to go through your heater and then come back out into from the pump and then back into your pool. And then these tubes will come off. They don't have to, but you can wiggle them apart. You can check down inside to see if there's any debris inside of them, and then spray water down if there are, and also clean the manifold, the main water that's coming in through the center and then sprays out to each of these, comes out each one of these tubes. Usually the dirtiest spot is on the bottom, but mine's pretty clean. If you've got a backwash, usually these things are cleaned. I don't have a backwash on mine, but by draining it through that bottom hole, a lot of it gets cleaned and sucked out just by the pressure of the water coming out. And then these things just kind of rest in place once you get them in the center. And then the next thing to do is to check your lid and clean the underside of that, make sure it's all good. And then I'll take all these filters and I'll bring them over here and put them back on, and then I'll drop the lid back on and start tightening things up. And remember to put the drain plug back in. So let's work on that. One thing I forgot to mention was cleaning the top of this manifold once you get the filters back on. If you put this back on and that screen is full of junk, then you're just putting dirt right back in. So you can pull the spring off, and my screen rather is pretty messed up, so I need to go ahead and replace this. I don't have one currently, but you can see it's all banged up and it's out of round, so I'm going to replace this on the next haul. So best thing to do here is just clean it up real good and get these parts nice and clean before you put them back together. Because the water comes up right through the center of that, just like that. It hits that screen. So it's always good to have it. And then these are the caps that go on the filters. Really hard to do this with one hand again, so I'm not going to worry about filming that, but you get the picture. Make sure this stuff is clean as you can get before you put it all back together. These valves back on, the best thing to do is just kind of give them little love taps. Get those back in once you get them lined up. You can see I've kind of got the screen already on there so that the center pipe here is coming up into the bottom of that screen. Everything's lined up. You can kind of hear when it seats itself. It's a little bit louder, and that holds everything together. And then the last thing before you put the lid on is don't forget to put your spring back on, because that's what gives you the tension when you tighten down the bottom section. So we'll go from there. One more important thing, one of the most important things to remember when you're putting the top back on while everything's still loose is where your gauge is going to face, because it's left in the open position. So go ahead and turn it to closed temporarily, so you know where it's at, and that'll give you the ability so that when you walk up and want to look at your gauge, you can see it and it's not flipped around on the back side. So that way you can bring your band up, start tightening everything. When you're in the closed position, it's going to be here, and then go ahead and open it before you start tightening everything down, so that when you go to pressurize the system, that valve is open. And we'll get to that in just a second. One of the things you want to do once you get this nut on hand tight is inspect around, especially on the back side, to make sure you're still on the ridge before you tighten anything down. That way, when this starts pulling together, you know, it's not going to fall off on you. It's still possible that it might. As you start to feel tension as you're tightening this, it's a good idea to take that rubber mallet and go around the outside of this bead and kind of pound some of the sections so that it helps seat it. I can feel the pressure starting to build up now, and I know it's not even close to being tight. So what I'll do is I'll take this hammer and just kind of tap it in a few places, especially on the back side. That helps seat this band, because this is the band that holds all the pressure. So this part's kind of important, and then all of a sudden I've got a ton of play here, so go back to tightening this up. I'll do that a couple times throughout the session of tightening this, just to make sure everything's good and seated, so that we got a good seal and no leaks. So I go through. Just kind of around the edges. That's usually good enough. Okay, so I've gone around and seated it, pulled this all the way in. Everything's tight. My valve is open. I did put the plug back in the bottom. One thing I didn't also show is I've already emptied that pump basket and cleaned it, so it's good to go. I did that before I started. Everything's back together. So the next steps are to turn the pump back on and then get the DE filter and take that back in and put it into the pool so that it runs through the filter and charges that filter. So here we go. We'll go ahead and turn this back on. And if the air pressure valve is open, as soon as that starts spraying, we know it's full. And close it. And we're going to check the valve here, see where we're at. We can adjust this outer band a little bit. We'll line those up as well as we can, I guess. So now we're at a clean setup, just under 20, and this one's going to tell me this is where I started, and this, when it gets to this, it's time to clean it again. Another thing I like to do is inspect everything for some massive drips or any leaks that might be coming around. Usually you know right away because that's under pressure. Same with my filter pump. I go check the pump and make sure it's secured, and it does look like it is. So now we'll go inspect the pool. So here's my label. I've got a Quad DE80. Let's see if I get it on there. There we go. Quad DE80. So that's going to tell me how much DE dichotomous earth to put in the pool. So now I return to my pool side. My early warning for when my filter gets full is this pool feature from my hot tub that drains down into the pool. I can tell it's in good shape when it's flowing smooth, but when that filter gets full, that doesn't flow hardly at all. And that's when I know to go do everything. So now I'm going to utilize my strainer and fill that full of DE filter, dichotomous earth. And since I've got a quad 80, I'll put 8 pounds of DE into that as soon as I remove the strainer. Okay. I'm going to pre-mix this, take the water out of the pool here. Remove my strainer basket. Got my water here and my DE filter powder. Doesn't have to be exactly to the top of this. There's one. There's two. I like to do 3 or 4. 3. There's 4. So this is my first one. Real important to mix this up. Get it all kind of not so chunky so it goes into the filter smoother. Another key thing is to pour slowly so that it doesn't backwash into the pool. So once you get a good mix and it's not granular, go ahead and pull it. Kind of about this speed. If you dump it in, it's going to come out the bottom filters and show up where you don't want it. Eventually it will make it to the filter, but a lot of it will get lost. I like to stir it about halfway through as well because it does settle back down. Now this is pulling it directly back to the filter where we started. Just charging those sections up. Again, I had a quad DE80, so I can 8 pounds. Got 4 pounds in it now. 5. 6. 7. 8. I want to mix this up again. One of the things is after I do this, I also go back and check the pressure on the regulator on top of that filter to make sure I'm still sitting at the same pressure. I haven't clogged anything up. Again, take this kind of slow. Don't fill it, overfill it. Get about halfway. Pause, remix it, make sure you're touching the bottom of the bucket. Everything's clear. If you make a little bit of mess, it's fine. It's just dichotomous earth, people. I'm not a pro. I'm not an environmentalist, so couldn't tell you. There's silica in it, maybe. I don't know. It's earth going to earth. Let somebody else fight that battle. I'm already putting chemicals in the pool, so there you have it. A little bit left. Grab some water from the pool. Switch it around. Clean it out. Another thing I do is clear off the pool. Wash that down. Don't forget to put your basket back on. Strainer. I don't know if you've seen one of these. These are the little tornado deals. You know, this is a standard basket, and these create a little more suction. I kind of like them. Also, they float up to the top when you turn the pump off, and it holds all the debris inside so it doesn't float back into the pool. So, very good little tool. You set it in there and it creates its own suction, pulls itself down, and forms a seal, and then it creates a little tornado. So there you have it. About all there is. Now I got to go check that fuel for that pressure. gauge back on the filter. So there goes my vortex pool thing starting to work. I know I've got good flow in the pool. I've got some leaves I need to clean out now. Everything's looking good.